NASCAR has just announced big rule changes that are sure to shake things up on the track, so the racing world is in for a wild trip. What's more, the best part? The changes are in reaction to the lifting of sanctions on Hendrick Motorsports. So how will these new rules affect the rest of the season? What do NASCAR officials think about this? Join us as we delve into the latest chapter of the NASCAR world. But before that, please subscribe to our channel and hit the like button for more whereabouts on NASCAR. In recent weeks, everyone's attention has been focused on the appeals process, particularly because of the rulings that were made regarding Hendrick Motorsports and Kaulig Racing. Now, NASCAR has made a big change to the rulebook. According to an update that was provided on April 6th, NASCAR has altered the language that can be found in Section 10.5.2. In its current form, the provision reads as follows: National Motorsports Appeals Panel and Final Appeal Officer may not completely strike any element of an originally assessed penalty. These parties have the ability to make modifications to the initial punishment, but those modifications need to fall within a certain range. For instance, if NASCAR imposes a penalty that consists of 3 separate parts, a fine, a suspension, and a reduction in points, the appeals panel will not be able to eliminate one of these parts while maintaining the other 2. They have the option of overturning the entire penalty or making adjustments that are within the range of permissible options. Consider, as one example, the L2 level penalties that were implemented in advance of the 2022 Cup Series season. An L2 violation can result in penalties ranging from a point reduction of 75 to 120 points, a point deduction of 10 to 25 playoff points, the suspension of 1 or 2 crew members for a total of 4 to 6 races, and a fine that can range anywhere from $100,000 to $250,000. If NASCAR handed down a penalty that included a 6-race suspension for 2 crew members, a fine of $200,000, and the loss of 100 points, the appeals panel may lower these amounts while still finding that the team was in violation of the rule. They simply could not drop below 75 points, $100,000, or 4 races in any of the competitions. So, what led to this conversation? The fact that 2 distinct Chevrolet teams earned L2 level fines for identical offenses is the primary reason why this topic has been the focus of a more extensive discussion. Both parties filed an appeal, but one of them exited the conference room in a far stronger position. The first team to appeal was Hendrick Motorsports, which had been penalized at the L2 level for making unapproved modifications to a single source item, hood louvers. After the practice session at Phoenix Raceway, NASCAR authorities took 8 hood louvers from competing cars. The appeals panel came to the conclusion that HMS had broken the rules, and it affirmed the fines of $100,000 and suspensions of 4 races that had been handed down to the 4 crew chiefs. Nevertheless, the points deductions were overturned by the appeals panel. In comparison, Kaulig Racing had 1 hood louver taken away from them following the practice session at Phoenix Raceway. The L2 level punishment was given to the number 31 team as well, which resulted in an appeal occurring 1 week after HMS presented its case. The appeals panel, which consisted of a different group of members than the panel that heard the HMS appeal, came to the conclusion that Kaulig Racing was also in violation of the NASCAR rulebook. The suspension and the penalties that had been handed to crew chief Trent Owens were upheld. The points penalty was also kept, but it was cut from 100 to 75. On April 6th, NASCAR Chief Operating Officer Steve O'Donnell was quoted as saying, "I think we always have put the rules in place to be transparent and consistent across the board. So our penalties have been consistent. We've issued consistent penalties. We were surprised, as I think a lot of the fans were in the ruling, particularly on the Hendrick appeal taking away all points. So we recognized that our system had a flaw, and if someone was found to have violated the rule, we've stated that we were all about a culture change in the garage with this new car, and points needed to be part of any penalty going forward." What are your thoughts on these changes made by NASCAR in the rulebook? Tell us in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel and click the bell button for more updates. The next thing NASCAR has decided is to be focused on transparency. The first big change to the NASCAR rulebook was about the complaints process and what changes the panel could make after hearing the cases. The second update concentrated on providing greater transparency. Several discussions have taken place on the precise decisions made by the appeals panel and the logic that underpinned those findings. The most recent revision to the rulebook includes a provision stating that, if it so chooses, NASCAR may publish the rationale that was presented by an appeals panel or the final appeal officer in support of altering or rescinding a penalty. This modification will not result in an increase in the level of transparency that pertains to the appeals procedure. It will make clearer some of the murky issues that have produced unfavorable conversations inside the industry. Denny Hamlin was furious that NASCAR was making up the regulations as they went along, especially in light of the recent run of penalties that were handed out to a number of drivers and teams, including Hamlin's own. Denny Hamlin, who had his 25-point penalty and $50,000 fine for confessing to purposefully walling Ross Chastain at Phoenix Raceway, upheld upon appeal, did not take too kindly to the revisions, and he called out NASCAR for making up the rules as they go. Although it may look as if NASCAR is making up the rules as they go, and let's be honest, in a lot of ways that's exactly what they're doing. These rule changes will only be used for any future penalties that are ultimately challenged. For instance, these rules were not utilized when the decision was made to uphold Hamlin's penalty, and they would not be applied if Hendrick Motorsports decided to appeal their most recent fines, because the penalties had already been issued before NASCAR adjusted the playing field. Therefore, the answer to your question is that, strictly speaking, there is still a possibility that the most recent point penalties that were handed down to Bowman and Byron will be totally overturned if Hendrick Motorsports files an appeal and a panel decides to make another adjustment. NASCAR sent the number 24 and number 48 cars raced by William Byron and Alex Bowman to the R&D Center after the race in Richmond for further inspection. Hendrick Motorsports, HMS, finished first and second in that race, with Kyle Larson finishing ahead of Josh Berry. Larson's number 5 car breezed through the post-race inspection without incident. Both the 24th and 48th teams received L1 penalties for their violations. It was 60 points for the driver and owner, plus 5 points for the playoffs. Both Brian Campy and Greg Ives, who were working as interim crew chiefs, have been suspended for the next 2 races and fined $75,000 each. The teams were revealed to have made unlawful changes to the greenhouses of the vehicles. Because of the points penalty, Bowman drops from 1st to 7th place in the regular season rankings, while Byron drops from 4th to 14th. As of right now, during the 2023 season, NASCAR has found the Hendrick organization to be in violation of the rules for the second time. In response to these most recent sanctions, Hendrick Motorsports has made the following statement. "We are reviewing the penalties issued today by NASCAR, and will determine the next steps following Sunday's race at Bristol Motor Speedway. As for Hamlin, he will have little choice but to continue his practice of throwing people off balance and remaining completely silent afterwards. That strategy appeared to have worked for him in the previous week at Richmond Raceway, as he was not given a penalty for his involvement in the incident involving JJ Yealy." So, that's all we've got for today. We hope you enjoyed it. Tell us what you think of the video in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We hope to see you in the upcoming video.